Okay, welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about um, the uh, the lobes and formed because of the sulci in each hemisphere. So we're going to talk about these lobes and their function. Um, and there is one function of some of these lobes specific to sensory areas and motor areas, and we'll talk in detail about these sensory and motor areas in the last video. So as we discussed in the earlier video, there are 4 lobes in each hemisphere, right? This one, the hind part of it is called the occipital lobe. The front part is the front part is the frontal lobe, and this middle part is the parietal lobe, and this part right here is the temporal lobe. And the occipital lobe, which is the hind part, right here. So how many occipital lobes do we have? 2, because one on for the left hemisphere, the other one for the right. These are responsible for this is also called, there's this area called visual cortex, so these are responsible for vision. A simple question: patient X can't see after an accident, where would the damage likely be? Well, you know the answer. Okay, now let's look at the second structure called the parietal lobe. This parietal lobe is just in front of the occipital lobe, or behind the frontal lobe, or above the temporal lobe. Now, one important function of sensory lobe is that it is responsible for sensations, especially of the skin, right? So you feel the you feel the touch, temperature, pressure on different parts of your skin, wherever the sensitive part is throughout your body. It's because of a sensory cortex here. This layer is a sensory cortex. So we'll talk about this function of the parietal lobe later in the last video. Just keep in mind, parietal lobe has a thin layer of cells, basically one ridge, right? And this is called the sensory cortex, and we'll talk about this in the last video. But what also it does is not only sensory information from this cortex, but also information coming from the joints and muscles in terms of its position. In such a way that there is space for the skin of each and every body part. So there is a place for hand, there is a place for finger, there is a place for your neck, there is a place for your ear, there is a place for knee, there is a place for your leg. All the body parts have specific areas located to actually sense information from these areas specific to the skin. After a car accident, patient Y can feel touch, pain, or pressure on his legs. Why? Well, you know the answer. Okay. Now let's come back. Again, we'll come back to this one later. Let's come back to the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe, just like the parietal lobe has a sensory cortex, the frontal lobe, especially this back part of the frontal lobe, it has this ridge, this structure is called the motor cortex. It is responsible for motor action. So if you raise a cup, you're raising it because the muscles specific to that part of the body are controlled by this motor cortex in the frontal lobe. So patient Z can't move his thumb after a fall. Which part of the brain is likely damaged? Well, this is not necessarily the reason why. For these questions, I just wanted to give you a simple question to give you a chance to remember and try to recollect the information we just learned. Okay, another important function of forebrain is that it acts as an executive center. It's like the boss, the CEO of a company that doesn't do the work, right? They just delegate the work to others and make these moment-to-moment decisions. Right now, you might be watching it, and maybe you're so excited that you'll watch all the videos in one stretch. That's whoever decides makes a decision. That structure is the forebrain, and it acts as an executive center. Or maybe you don't like it, you stop it right now and go and have some tea, right? That decision, again, moment-to-moment decisions, planning, everything else that's conscious or consciously you are doing are because of this frontal lobe. So now, question: why can't individuals with ADHD plan or organize complex events? Well, research has suggested that there is one part of the frontal lobe, or the prefrontal cortex, that is not as active as it is in regular individuals or individuals without ADHD symptoms, and there is a direct connection between these two, and it's because of that they lack the skills specific to organizing and planning information or events or complex things. Okay, let's go back to the last lobe, the temporal lobe. Now you can see temporal lobes are right here, close to the ear, right? And of course, these are meant for auditory sensations or perceptions. A patient can hear from left ear after a blast injury. Which lobe is likely affected? Well, you know the answer. So that was about cerebral cortex in general, and in the next, which is the last video, I'll specifically talk about these cortices, the motor cortex and the motor cortex of the forebrain and the sensory cortex of the parietal lobe and frontal lobe. Yeah, so we'll talk about that in the next video. Take a break.